about. Even for a while, there's a professor at UCLA, she's retired now, called Afaf Marceau. You guys heard of her? No?
Marceau.
Afaf Marceau. She, her name is Afaf Lutfi Marceau. She's an Egyptian origin. She's at UCLA, and she's retired. She wrote a very good book on Egypt under Muhammad Ali, and anyway, so she had an idea of preserving many of the manuscripts that were written by Muslim female jurists, especially that we have long traditions of female jurists in places like Damascus, Cairo, and she's actually the one who's telling me that in places like Malaysia and Indonesia, we have traditions of Sufi tariqas that are led by female luminaries and so on. And yes, this is not a total response, but it's an incremental response that, and then from this perspective, I'm going to talk about this notion of submission, because I just want to give you a sense of what I mean when I say negotiate, to try to confront the challenges of modernity, the challenges while negotiating the Islamic tradition. And submission is sort of the case study that I'm going to use. But first, I would like to get your reaction to this idea. I mean, I know initially, a long time ago, I don't know if you've heard of Triple IT, right? I mean, they even have connections, I think, with Malaysia or Indonesia. Okay. Initially, Triple IT was inspired by this type of ideal. They got bogged down in this whole notion of Islamization of knowledge, which, again, it was a sloganistic, symbolic trap. Because it was trying to force a conclusion rather than investigate one. But initially, the ideal was we are going to go to a place where we can be relatively free. We're going to get top-notch scholars, and we are going to, not from a perspective of pro-West or anti-West, attempt to win the hearts and minds of Muslims back to their tradition by a serious engagement with that tradition. There are many problems that followed. Part of it is they caved in and took Saudi money, disastrous. Part of it is nepotism and the people who started getting hired by the institute or a friend of a friend and so on, including my relative Khaled Abou El Fadl. And part of it was that they got, someone had, his name is Khaled Abou who initially came up with this, before him Ismail Farouqi, the late Ismail Farouqi, who came up with the idea of Islamization of knowledge, and then it institutionally became so vested into this idea that they've lost incredible amount of credibility on it. Eventually, Taha Jabr Alwani and Khaled Abou El Fadl, who were sort of major figures in this, political pressure sent the FBI rummaging through their house. They weren't accused of anything, but the FBI searched their house twice, treated them in a way that was not very respectful. They were so humiliated and insulted by the experience, they left the US. And since then, Triple IT has been basically in the US dead. Now, whether it will have a life in Indonesia. It remains to be seen. It's not clear. But I mean, I'm not a sociologist. I'm not an anthropologist. I study intellectual history, and I do see there are moments where intellectual ideas seem to catch on, and all the stars line up, and you have a major paradigm shift. But it's not. That doesn't happen from. It's like fishing. If you plan to throw in the hook once, and after 5 minutes say, well, it didn't happen, then no fish can be caught. You're gonna have to fail a lot of times before even the possibility of one more thing I'll tell you about this, and then I really want to know what your reactions are to this notion. At one point, ex-President Khamenei had contacted me, and it was him and Ibrahim Musa and I think Kamali was also included, and he said that his experience in politics has been very bruising, and that he really liked to explore the idea of sort of should I get this in case it's
I don't know if it's for you or just in case.
Hello?
Go on.
Yeah, you were saying that his experience in politics was very bruising, and that as he was reading the works of various people, and he this is hello? Yes? أهلا دكتور نصر، أهلا وسهلا، كيف الحال؟ معلش يا دكتور، أنا الحقيقة you caught me teaching my seminar، لا فمعذرة معلش، as soon as I'm done I'll give you a call. طيب أنا سعيد جدا إني أسمع صوتك. طيب ده نمرة المكتب. طب الله يخليك ياسر. This is Nasr Abu Zaid from Leiden.
Abu Zaid.
Yeah, Abu Zaid. Yeah, it's
the professor.
Yeah. I also have a class last semester.
Yeah, he's I met him. In Egypt first, but then I met him in Leiden, and we haven't been good about keeping in touch. But when we cross paths, it's, we have a lot of the same intellectual.
Oh, this is the famous Abu Zaid.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. He just called. Okay.
the Egyptian.
We have one man who's contacted by Khamenei, and we have Abu Zaid. I feel this is an important moment at this table.
Oh, I actually remember now who was the other. It wasn't just Khamenei. Just if you think it was an important sort of moment, I actually thought it was an important sort of. What's his name? The ex-Prime Minister of Malaysia. Mahathir Mohamad. Right.
Okay. He called you also.
he was actually he was the one who, according to Khamenei, initiated this, and we actually organized a meeting that was attended by Mahathir Mohamad, Ibrahim Musa, myself, Kamali. Khamenei could not come because of political reasons. So we with that meeting, we decided we're going to meet in Cyprus next time. But here's the thing. We all got together, right? And we talked about, we are so tired of the reactive mode. We are so tired of living in the shadows of colonialism or living in the shadows of fundamentalism, that we must take initiative, we must this, we must that. But we never met again, and when I think back why, each of us were overcome by our own personal difficulties. If there was one charismatic person amongst us, or in fact, if there was a charismatic philanthroper, a charismatic person who is funding the meetings and saying no, it would have been perhaps a moment in history. I know that when we met, a lot of people had ideas about ways to go, places, and so on and so forth, in what an institute could do. But Khamenei got his situation in Iran became all-encompassing. Mahathir had his own problems and became engulfed by them. Kamali, I didn't see Kamali as rigorous enough to take him very seriously. So it was when it was left to Ibrahim Musa, Kamali, and I, sort of the energy went out of it, and especially when we're saying, okay, so where are we gonna, it was no longer initiatives. It was just like friends meeting and having coffee and eating pizza, and then see you later. So it's just,
it didn't change the world.
But it just so I remain. I keep thinking, what other way can there? I don't know. Is this too simplistic thinking, or is this a possible avenue?
Yeah, it's interesting as you mentioned the way Muslim intellectual attempts to rediscover the Islamic tradition, or to be negotiated with modernity. And just, I think it's a perfect example in Indonesia is the initiative made by the late Nur Khalid Majid,
Right,
who
Islamic Law
from Chicago in 1980s, trying to introduce to an Indonesian society his idea of modernism or neo-modernism, and how we create what we call Indonesian Islam, Islam in Indonesia, and that's to some extent reduced the Puritanistic ideas about Islam, which has been not connected to Middle Easterns in orientation and so forth. Yeah, it's took perhaps 10 or 20 years. He ran this institution, like philanthropic institution, that funded kind of intellectual project. And now the idea is still leading in society. Yeah. However, at the same time, we also cannot disregard the fact that another wave of tradition, what you call in your book Puritanism, transnational movement, Islamic movement, also give greater impact on our society, and it's kind of a battle. One side intellectual groups, Muslims in Muslim society like Indonesia, are trying to reformulate the idea of Islam in Indonesia. At the same time, the challenge is much more greater, like the ones you mentioned yesterday's, like Hizb ut-Tahrir and Wahhabism and so forth and so on. Yeah.
I mean, you know.
What's interesting is the position of the state, and it's very important to look at the position of state in this case, because unlike during the new order era, when the government is trying to make sort of distance with the idea of Islam, and of course at the late of new order, Indonesia also trying to approach Islam and didn't show the hostile attitude toward Islam, but post-colonial period is kind of new political milieu where Islam is much more influential in the political institution, and to some extent I'm not sure whether we can say that this is a new discovery of Islam in Indonesia, or repeating what happened several hundreds ago when the position of Islam and state. Of course, at the level of grassroots, innovation has been made, but like in the philanthropic activism, however, philanthropic institutions pay much more attention to the economic and hardship faced by society instead of dealing with intellectual project. And in this respect, I see that the intellectual project and the movement led by Muslim groups at the grassroots level are sometimes not connected.
I mean, this is you know, you put your hand right on the, because you know I confronted very concretely with this when I, for instance, discover a set of manuscripts that need to be saved, right? And I go to a wealthy Egyptian and I say, and this Egyptian, you know, he's going to donate a certain amount of money, and it's either going to go to poor people, feeding poor people, or, and it's very hard right now, very hard. In fact, I have never won, where I would convince that rich fellow or a rich person to help save manuscripts or fund an intellectual project, or rather than feed and house. And I know, I mean, here there's as a you know, I have to say that I do a lot of ibadah on this because in you know, I have to feel with my conscience that in my relationship with Allah, that in good faith, when I say knowledge in this situation is more important than feeding people, and that's a very difficult moral position to be in. But it's a predicament, like all really ethical, powerful ethical predicaments. But I think at least the beginning is that we identify the predicament and be able to start talking about it. That's the beginning, at least. Okay, let's take a break till 3:15. We are, because there's the camera is running the schedule. Does anyone see my? Oh, okay.
You were sitting over here, so.
It's like, well, did I forget to wear a jacket today?
Probably not in this weather.
Is it usually like this?
In June, it goes back and forth.
like warm one day and rainy another day.
Yeah, it goes back and forth. Sometimes you have a couple of weeks where it's like sunny,
Yeah.
and very nice, and there's like a real summer, and then it just switches back. You never know. And it's not as bad here as it is in England. I mean, in England, it's every few hours it could be different, and you know.
Never everyone always bring umbrellas.
Yeah, here it's a.
And in the winter, like in this, does it get
Snows.
painfully cold? Or?
Yeah, I think so. To me, yes. To me, it's painfully cold.